is need to align MPI indicators and a way to track multidimensional poverty within national development plans. At the state level, it's also there's a need to align state expenditure with PI poverty targets, and also within the sectors, there's need for specific sectoral targets such as school enrollment, maternal and child health, wash access, but it is existing. It does not really align properly with the realities of the multidimensional poverty indicators. Also, there's also the inclusive aspect, because of the rural-urban regional inequalities and gender to look at that from that lens. So we're proposing, a coordinating mechanism whereby there'll be within the federal government, there'll be a national MPI reporting that will integrate MPI into the framework, as well as the broader SDGs agenda. And at the state level, there'll be MPI dashboards that will embed MPI into the state medium-term expenditure framework. And then there should also be a joint federal and state mechanism, that will involve shared MPI data platforms. And the battery is already here. And also within development partners and CSOs, there is need for technical support for MPI methodology, especially in the terms of household surveys. For you to capture multidimensional poverty, you need surveys to capture it. So next, so this is just the diagram showed how MPI data can link the sectors, link the budgetary mechanisms, and also bringing poverty reduction front and center in policy. So future budgets should prioritize states and LGAs with the highest MPI deprivations. And there should also be proper spending in such a way that it directs to those highly deprivation aspects like education, health, wash, housing, and nutrition. So they should also apply an equity lens, capturing marginalized women. And then importantly, there should be a monitoring and evaluation system so that to monitor whether the spending actually transfers to poverty reduction. So there have been some countries that have been successful in applying MPI into their policy frameworks. Mexico has linked MPI to conditional cash transfers that targeted the poorest households and improved educational health and nutrition outcomes. In Colombia, they also integrated MPI to their development plans and it led them to monitor policy performance, poverty rates reductions. In South Africa, they developed a child MPI social protection. Ghana also applied district level MPI data in their budget allocations and poverty. So some developing countries, even in Africa, have been applying this MPI into their policy frameworks, and we think Nigeria should follow suit. So, policy implications for Nigeria. This MPI provides a more precise tool to identify the poor where they are and what deprivations that they face. So it will be. What we need is to embed them into our budgeting planning process first, and then allocation should also prioritize areas with more deprivations than areas with less deprivations. And then there should be an effective and coordinating mechanisms within both federal, state, and sectoral institutions for there to be a good poverty reduction strategy. Next is to also prioritize women and rural households, and also importantly institutionalize a monitoring and accountability mechanisms to monitor poverty reduction results. So in conclusion, MPI goes beyond measuring deprivation, like I said. It provides a strategic instrument for planning, budgeting, and accountability. So for Nigeria, if we apply these, if we embed MPI into these frameworks, then we will have little hope in achieving all these ambitious goals, such as ending poverty as the SDG 1, Agenda 2063 aspirations of inclusive growth and human capital, as well as achieving inclusive and sustainable growth.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chukwuka, for such an insightful presentation. We are blessed to have excellent panelists to spark our conversations. I already have Dr. Chukwuka with me here on set. I would like to invite our second panelist, who is Mr. Kali Kali. He is the executive advisor to the Katsina State government. He offers valuable state-level policy experience. You're welcome, sir. So, to Dr. Chukwuka, you have shown, in your presentation, you have shown us what the data says. Over 63% of the Nigerians are multidimensionally poor.
Yep.
The northern states experience significantly higher poverty rate, and the rural areas are disproportionately affected. And Nigeria is not passive in fighting against poverty. Successive governments have introduced programs such as cash transfers to tackle multidimensional poverty, yet with limited. So from your practical steps should government take more effectively lift people out of poverty? So if you are talking about cash transfers, are you trying to, we definitely know that cash transfers do not solve poverty in long term. So what practical steps do you think government can take to lift people out of poverty?
Right, thanks for that question. I'll start by reiterating that with this presentation of multidimensional poverty, it's obvious that cash transfers will be limited. Because cash transfers will just capture the income aspect of poverty without touching on the different dimensions. And that's not the only problem. For cash transfers to even be effective, it has to be done at scale. It has to be done at a scale that it will have the chance of even tackling other issues. So there are also fiscal constraints towards bringing them up to scale. But more deeper problem is actually that there is weak targeting. The existing social registers in the country are not effective enough to implement effective cash transfer. So the country really needs an evidence-driven social protection strategy that we identify and profile the vulnerable people more effectively. Also, there is need to invest more in human capital. The key targets, the UNESCO target on education of 25, it is 15 to 20% of public expenditure on education, as well as the Abuja declaration of 10%? 15, yes. Yeah. So at both the federal and state levels, it's just very few states that have met that target. So there's need for massive investment in the social sectors, especially at this time, where there's inflationary pressures, there's cost of living crisis. Investing social spending should really increase if, for Nigeria to have a chance of reducing its high poverty rates. Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Chikuka. So to Mr. Kali, welcome, sir. A very recent data by UNICEF 2025 data shows that Katsina has about 75% children living in multidimensional poverty. So my question now to you is that northern states continue to experience significant higher poverty rate compared to the rest of the country. So in your view, how can the federal and state governments work more effectively together to coordinate efforts and lift people out of poverty in the northern states and particularly in Katsina State? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me just quickly summarize it. What we witness in the North especially is what I like to term the politicization of economic development and poverty reduction. What do we mean? You want to cater to data, accurate planning using MPI, HDI, whatever it is, right? But the politics does not allow for that, right? If you say, 75% of 10 million people, the children, MPI, if you say, okay, then our priority would be XYZ local government, XYZ ward, then the other guys in the other wards based on politics would be like, what about us, right? And then you have misplaced priorities, and then you have 4 years to execute. It's an election cycle and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of issues, and we've dwelled on the challenges, and I'm very tired of dwelling on challenges in Nigeria. It's all about solutions now. So what do we do? What we do is very, it's funny in governance. The most obvious thing to do is always the hardest thing to do, right? It's easy enough to get elected. Doing the work is something else totally, right? But then the question is, why were you elected? What are you meant to do? How are you meant to do it? When you begin to give into the client patronage system, and then you have this ideal system of governance, which I've spoken about, that Doctor has mentioned, especially in his beautiful presentation. In between is the politicization that I'm talking about. Everything from the capacity of the appointees being politicians. And I'm not saying anything against politicians. I'm just saying maybe our democracy has not evolved to that level where we need to begin to demarcate between governance and politics in of itself. You can see maybe countries like America, 200-300 years of democracy. If I'm a very good politician and I'm very good at electing people, once the election is done, I step aside. And then we appoint the best and the brightest during the governance. So what do we need to do? Very simple. Federal government needs to do what it needs to do, but let me talk about the subnational component and aspect. For example, in Katsina, and this is the second subnational being appointed in. I used to work in Kaduna, and now I'm appointed in Katsina, where I'm from. What we need to do is every subnational needs to begin to think of itself as a country, absent fiscal and monetary policy. You need to begin to understand that you can create policies that will shape your factors of production, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. How do you, for example, in Katsina, the economic vision now is we want to be a globally competitive subnational. We want to do that by maybe broad-based economic sectoral policies, institutional reforms, and so on. Very nice stuff on paper. When you go to implement, that's when the reality hits. So every subnational needs to do that. You need to have your state development plans in line with the federal government plans, in line with global best practices, standards, SDGs, and so on and so forth. And once you do that, you then have your state development plan. You need to do your MTSS, that's your medium-term sectoral strategies, your MTEF that he mentioned in his presentation. Come down all the way to your SIP sectoral implementation plans. Budget it. What we're doing in Katsina is something called Community Development Program, where you go down to the ward levels. We have 361 wards, 34 local government. Every single ward has like a shopping list of what exactly it is a priority for them. We then sieve that through the budgeting cycle and then make sure that we give priority to what needs to be done based on the local government, senatorial zones, all the way up to a state level. Once you do that, then you need to have your sectoral policies. So for us, we need to commercialize every single sector. If you don't have a government-enabled private sector-led economy, you're not going anywhere. That's just what we need to turn every single state into. The private sector is the solution to our unemployment problems, multidimensional poverty index, all these things that we're talking about. It's nice enough to give cash, but if you don't have a job that's sustainable, we don't have businessmen that are creating wealth, if we're not in that wealth creation mindset, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to achieve anything in this country. You cannot tax poverty. What are you taxing? What wealth have you created? So that value addition, value creation mindset is what we need to turn people into. For so long, our parents have failed, and I'm going to say this, they have failed in that mindset of creating value, right? They have spoken the English. We are also speaking the English now, but then it's all about what we do in reality that will make the difference. So for example, when also championing regional approaches now. So I like how everybody's talking about federal, state, but there's an in-between there, and that's regional. We want to begin to name and shame subnationals that are lagging. So if Katsina is doing well, Zamfara is lagging, or Zamfara is doing well and Katsina is lagging, we need to be doing peer review learning sessions. We need to be benchmarking with each other and global best practices and standards, and see who is lagging behind, what we need to do regionally, and then we can begin to talk about a federal approach. So that's the one, the answer to the question. What we need to do is every single state, once you're done with your budgeting, state development plans, etc., then your coordination mechanisms also need to matter. So you need to do maybe stuff like ministerial briefings. Once you do the policies, every single institution that you have created and reformed has new laws. It can be able to do more. You need to come back maybe to the governor, executive council level to be reporting back either quarterly, monthly, whatever frequency you choose. Where are we on this data capture efforts of ours, right? And this data game is boring, is not exciting, it is too mundane, but then it requires people to all key into it. You need to build your bureau of statistics in every single state. You need to build your state statistical systems. Sure. The quality of the statistics itself also matters. You're going to be churning out data and, massaging it here and there and saying, we're solving for poverty. But these are the key challenges. Once you do that, then you can begin to monitor yearly whether or not your administration is actually even doing well, rather than opposed to this guy is known as the government that was just sharing money. Did you really lift people out of poverty? Even if you lie that you do, a lot of people at the grassroots level can testify to, well, we don't feel it. This guy is speaking English saying that the MPI, whatever statistics is growing and blah, blah, but we don't feel it. The best way to approach this is a private sector-led economic growth in every single subnational. Thank you.
That was quite insightful. So I wanted to ask a follow-up question. You mentioned political transitions. So how can states build continuity in poverty reduction strategies, regardless of who is in power?
Okay, so I'm one of those advocates of, I don't believe in this 4-year cycle that we have. I think it's archaic. I think it doesn't even make sense. The moment you enter, first year is the honeymoon stage. Everybody loves you. You're a performing governor, blah, blah, blah. So if I was a governor, and God forbid, I don't want to be a governor. I don't even know I just want to be governors. If you really want to do the work, it's crazy. Like, you're governing 10 million people. It's a country in of its own. So you go in, there's a honeymoon stage, and then there's a stage where people will go, wait a minute, is this guy really performing? And that's like the second, third stage. And before you know, it's election time. And when it's election season, that's when the politicization comes in. Because now you cannot tell them, oh, hold up, this policy, once it translates, the MPI will increase. Who's going to listen to you? We're looking for you to drop the money so I can elect you, yes or no, and so on. So I'm one of the advocates of a 6-year, one-term cycle. Why? I mean, think about it. I do 3 years, maybe honeymoon, no honeymoon. I do a midterm review. I really see whether this administration is working or not, etc. And then I perform. If I do well, great. If I don't do well, we definitely don't make that mistake anymore. How do we institutionalize? Nigeria is a very funny country. Having served in Kaduna, and people always ask, so but Kali, all the things you guys did in Kaduna, how do you institutionalize it? And I always go, well, I don't want to take Panadol for another administration's headache. I don't care anymore. Because really, you can't keep going back and, saying or trying to dwell on the past or whatever. The best you can do is institutionalize it via laws. But I think laws are not enough, because you can politicize your state house of assembly, you can hijack them and just get the laws passed if they're a rubber stamp institution. The best thing to do is to get the buy-in of the people, stakeholder engagement. What do we mean? If I was doing the private sector led driven approach in a state government, and I brought a company into a local government, and I showed these guys results. Look, all of you are now employed. All of you have money. You guys have extra income above inflation rate, etc. You're carrying your kids to school. You have better living standards. Your healthcare is in check, etc. They have already seen the impact. Now, if a useless governor comes after me and he tries to take away that approach, they're going to fight him, right? So the best way to institutionalize it is to get the laws in, get the buy-in of the local communities, make sure they also own the projects, own the policies, and make sure it's a community-driven approach towards that development or economic development that we're talking about in the MPIs. And I think it's sort of the best strategy for you to make things more long-term rather than the myopic, grab what you can this year, next year, election, money and so on. So I think roughly this is the solution in my head.
Let's give him a round of applause again. Thank you. That was very insightful. So to Dr. Chukwuka, as the Executive Director of Center for the Study of the Economies of Africa, a think tank that produces extensive research on governance and poverty in Nigeria, why do you think Nigeria's MPI data has not significantly shaped national policy making or budget processes? And what reforms change this?
So I'll say what we need to do as a think tank. So what we can do as a knowledge-based institution, is to promote or advocate for, what we call evidence-based engagement with key budgetary social protection institutions to ensure that areas with high poverty incidents in the regions are prioritized, both at the federal and at the state levels, and also to align the plans, because Nigeria has development plans, but poverty is not front and center. We can do that technical bit about allowing, bringing out the targets at the sectors in terms of poverty reduction potentials. We as a think tank can also advocate for what we call a poverty reduction based budgeting. But these are all technical, aspects of the intervention. But what my co-pilot said is the basic thing. In the absence of political will, everything we do from the knowledge space will not materialize. If you go to a state and identify MPI is high in these local government areas, and tell the governor that, hey, these are the areas to focus on. And the governor has his own plan, his own area of the state, and the areas of his strategic political allies. There is nothing in this world that will make him or her to focus on those areas. So we, in Nigeria, we don't really have the absence of ideas and knowledge, what we do in our think tanks. But he just hit the nail on the hammer on the nail. Like, without political will, and if the interests of the political actors are not aligned with all these all these are technical contributions, nothing much will happen. So I've said my own bit. We know what to do. We know how to do those alignments that will lead to poverty reduction. But in the absence of political will, the implementation will surely be there will be shortfalls in implementation.
Thank you. So let's talk about gender-sensitive poverty reduction strategies. How can poverty reduction programs be designed to be more gender-sensitive, particularly in addressing the barriers women face in access to education, finance, and decent work compared to their male counterpart? Let me start with you first, Mr. Kali, then I move forward to Dr. Chukwuka.
So there was a quite an experience that I've had where, so I'm quite biased to the technology sector. I feel it's one of those sectors that will just unlock some exponential growth miraculously in the North, especially. We're lagging. And then we had this Click on Kaduna program. Very weirdly, we held sessions where You would come in, you pitch for your program, etc. We had the World Bank to fund you and so on. And interestingly, I can say maybe out of 10 people that pitched, maybe per hour or whatever, 9 or 8 were women. That just blew me away, right? And it's like women in their hijab, and it's like married women with their kids and so on. And I was blown away because I was like, so what is going on? It means we're not really in touch with the reality, right? It means there are women that are capable, able, willing, and they're innovating in their homes despite the cultural challenges, religious, and so on and so forth. So that blew me away. Now, that is what you call evidence-based approach, where we now began to design policies. We began to design these things in mind. First of all, you have to get your data right. The women, where are they? How many are they? What exactly they need, and so on and so forth. And that's the English that needs to be spoken that isn't being spoken, right? Once you do that, that whole talk of women, if you empower women, you empower community and blah, blah, it's all talk. But, once you get to the real action, there's the whole cultural backlash where the guy will take the money and so on and so forth. So the issues that we have is, you design the policies. I think in Kazuna, we did something called inclusive economy policy, where whatever initiative we're doing, we need to consider women. Now, it's not really on a quota basis. It's on a merit basis. Why merit and not quota? Because if you do a quota basis, then it's like an equality of outcome. It's more socialist type based things, right? But if we truly believe in women and we make it a merit based system, then we believe that the women have more merit than men, right? So that's how we've designed those. And thankfully, women are doing better than the men. So once you design that, you make sure it's merit based. You make sure you give an equality of opportunity for everybody. Just open up the door to everyone. Make sure you give the social safety nets, the helping hand to ensure the women are empowered. Bring them out. Whatever challenges it is, you need to tackle them and identify them. But I say that's really mostly how it is. Engage them in the policy making process, right? Get your data right. Make sure they're engaged in the policy making process. Make sure they're also represented within government as well, because that's the only way how to speak the language of the women themselves. And I think really after that, it's all about implementation. Anything beyond that is just, like I said, is just English. You can bring in the doctors to do the think tanking and everything, but if that doesn't translate into your MPI, women being uplifted, we're just speaking English.
Thank you. Over to you.
On my own side, is that actually English that we're speaking? Yeah. So, why you mentioned the merit-based approach? For me, I would say not quite. The key question is, what is actually driving this inequality, this gender inequality? Our research has shown that if you do something merit-based, the one where it will surely disadvantage women, because the drivers of the inequality is beyond their control. It's cultural, it's deeper, it's societal and cultural. So having said that, you need to have a clear intervention strategy that targets women, because they are more vulnerable, and they and also, like you said, when you target women, you target the whole household. The transmission channel between a woman and the children is clear, and specific, than the man. So I think, in terms of poverty reduction, women should be targeted if you really want a clear and effective poverty reduction strategy. There are a lot of interventions already targeting women. If you go to the World Bank, UNDP, they have a lot of programs targeting women, but I think it should be scaled up, because they remain vulnerable, and, because of these factors that I mentioned. So I think there still needs to be, interventions and programs and investments that will target women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chukwuka. Before we move to the next section, I would like to ask a final question, and it's on digitalization and financial inclusion. Digital transformation is often seen as a game changer for poverty reduction and financial inclusion, social protection, and job creation. Yet, many of the poorest people, especially in the rural areas, still lack access to digital tools. Like I was in a community recently, and I heard that for the past 12 years, they've not had light. So I was wondering what was happening in that community. So, in the light of this reality, where do you see digital technology making the biggest difference, and how can it be made possible to the most vulnerable in the remote areas? Let me start with Yunus.
Okay. So first of all, they need to be connected. And I think there was a statistic that we saw when we first came on board in Katsina. Apparently, we saw a statistic saying 87% of people in the rural areas, or the population in the rural areas, had internet access in Katsina. Something mind-boggling like that. And I was like, are they the bandits that are on TikTok, or what was going on? Because it didn't even make any sense, right? Turns out, Kuma, there's a lot of engagement. It's a question of connecting everybody. So when we came in, we reached out to IHS. IHS did like a 27-kilometer fiber optic ring access within the metropolitan area. The English is too much. The metropolitan area. And then we have now scaled that to the second phase, about, I think, 1,000 kilometers across the 34 local governments. So access is first, right? Digital infrastructure is key. So when you're doing your digital public infrastructure, DPI, you need to make sure they're connected. Once they're connected, then you can begin to collect data. And this is where technology begins to solve this data issue that I've been talking about. If they're connected, you begin to know what sort of activities. You're building a holistic GIS system. The geographic information system is very key. I think there's a book called Smarter Government. I think Martin O'Malley, it's stuff he did as the mayor of Baltimore and governor of Maryland. If you have, take a look at how GIS has transformed land administration, for example, in states. I think RFI did it in Abuja. It worked very well in Kaduna as well. Lagos, etc. Once we can connect everybody, we can begin to collect more data. We can begin to create more jobs. We can begin to actually identify the poverty areas, the clusters where intervention needs to be made, and so on and so forth. And again, like I said, I'm very biased to this sector. Like you have said, it's going to be the sector that will enable us to leapfrog. It's going to be the sector that we have been creating a lot of laws around it, like we did the startup bill, both in Kaduna and Katsina now. We've done the Iowa Tech Fest. And again, like I mentioned, regional. Electricity. I'm a power guy throughout. Why? Between Katsina, Kano, and Jigawa, we're about to create the first regional electricity regulatory commission. We don't believe in a state regulatory commission because the northern states are at a disadvantage. What do we mean? 17 states in the south, I think about 16 of them have power plants in each state. In the north, the 19 states, I think about 2 or 3 only have power plants in each state. So then if you create a state electricity market, which market? Right? You don't have industrial clusters. You only have residential clusters. They can't afford the electricity. They're mostly in the rural area. So what market are you creating? Who are you charging tariffs for? Is it that you speak English, you pass a state electricity law, and then they see tariffs go up and they go, yep, you see them. Western guys coming in, Boko Haram will come and start doing their own preaching, and so on and so forth. So we said, fine, you know what we'll do? There's already a franchise area with Kano Electric. Kano Industries can cross-subsidize the residential areas and the rural areas within Jigawa and Katsina, where we're not that, we're financially, strong enough to pay the tariffs. With the rural communities, we're going to do the usual solar systems, mini grids, etc., decentralizing power itself. And then we're going to make sure we build industrial hubs where power itself is the key comparative advantage. So we'll be like, oh, come to the green economic zone. You have 24-hour electricity, blah, blah, blah. We have a solar park, etc., and so on. So electrification is very key. Once we power the growth, right? We're trying to do that, build it, and then they will come type thing. We had a windmill that was like about 10 megawatt windmill. It's been about 15 years. It hasn't been revived. We're in the process of reviving it now with the ICRC. So I see it very key. Technology, connecting people, electrifying, communities, etc. And I think, we'll experience exponential growth if we have deliberate action taking into these various sectors to commercialize them and also intervene where necessary for social protection and also where people cannot afford it to get ourselves out of poverty.
Yeah, so I really believe that digital technology as well as fintechs can really enhance both targeting and empowerment of vulnerable groups, as well as lead to some form of elevation of the poor. Let me talk a bit about fintech. As financial inclusion is a key way of targeting and empowering poor people. Once they have once poor people have access to a mobile phone and they have an account, then you can identify them because I saw a report from NDIC that says that 90% of account holders have less than 200,000, 500,000. So they also have it by 50,000. From there, you can target who are the poor people and where they are, through that access to bank accounts, and that has really, really improved in the last few years with fintechs like all this OPay and Money Point. These days, if I go to rural areas and but I don't have cash, and they tell me, "Hey, I have OPay." Yeah, don't worry, that way. I'll give you the money. So those improvements have really helped in targeting and also empowering the poor, because a lot of those interventions, like vouchers, cash transfers, they require you to be financially included for that to be effective. So digital technology is the key. As long as there is more digital access, there is more hope for the poor to be targeted and empowered better. However, there is need to improve digital infrastructure, internet access, electricity. Those are the key constraints to the development of digital access. Thank you.